Emily and Brad Weston had waited their whole lives for this moment, a perfect honeymoon in paradise, but just 7 days after their vows, their dream turned into a nightmare so brutal it shocked the world. Emily and Brad Weston had just begun the life they always dreamed of. College sweethearts from Oregon State, they had grown up in neighboring towns, met at a campus coffee shop, and never looked back. Their romance was steady and strong, full of quiet mornings, road trips, and plans for the future. After 6 years together, Brad proposed during a hike through Crater Lake National Park, a moment captured in a blurry, beautiful photo that would later be printed in newspapers for a much darker reason. Their June 2019 wedding was small but elegant, held in a rustic barn surrounded by wildflowers and friends. The couple seemed blissfully happy, and everyone who knew them said they were perfect for each other. The honeymoon was supposed to be their time to unwind, to enjoy peace, nature, and each other before settling into married life. They chose Costa Rica, known for its beaches, jungles, and slow pace. Instead of a commercial hotel, they booked a stay at an eco-resort on the Nicoya Peninsula, an off-the-grid getaway that offered privacy and breathtaking ocean views. The cabin they reserved sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, surrounded by trees and accessible only by foot or ATV. The idea of waking up to birdsong and watching sunsets from a hammock appealed to both of them. Brad was an amateur photographer, excited to capture the tropical landscape. Emily loved the idea of unplugging and journaling by candlelight. It seemed like the perfect place to begin their new life as husband and wife. They arrived on June 10th and immediately began posting cheerful updates on Instagram. Photos showed them exploring hidden beaches, trying fresh fruit, and standing on a rocky bluff with the wind in their hair. The tone was light and loving, their smiles wide and genuine. Friends back home followed their posts with envy, commenting on how happy they looked. Emily's last post was a video of Brad spinning her around in the sand, the ocean behind them glowing under the setting sun. It was captioned, "Best day of my life." No one could have imagined it would be the last time anyone would see either of them alive. On June 17th, the couple didn't show up for breakfast or check in for the morning yoga class they had booked. Their cabin was found untouched, their phones on the nightstand, passports in a drawer, but no sign of them. The resort staff waited, assuming they'd gone for a sunrise walk. But by sunset, there was still no word. What had started as a dream was now unraveling into something far more disturbing. Unanswered questions began to pile up, and a creeping sense of dread settled over the quiet resort. Something had gone terribly wrong. What was supposed to be the happiest chapter of Emily and Brad's lives was about to turn into a nightmare that would echo around the world. The disappearance of Emily and Brad Weston sent a ripple of unease through the small eco-resort. At first, the staff maintained hope, believing the couple had simply gone exploring without notice. It wasn't uncommon for guests to head out early and spend the day hiking or visiting nearby villages without checking in. But as the hours passed, their absence began to feel less like freedom and more like a warning. Their cabin door was unlocked. Their belongings were neatly arranged inside. 2 untouched plates of fruit and coffee sat in their bungalow's kitchenette, evidence that they hadn't even started their morning. The local police were called by late afternoon. By the next morning, a full search had begun. Officers, resort employees, and volunteers combed nearby trails, cliffs, and forest paths. The jungle surrounding the area was thick, hot, and disorienting. Even experienced hikers could easily lose their way. But Emily and Brad weren't known to be careless. They were cautious travelers, planning each activity carefully. It wasn't like them to vanish. Helicopters were brought in and dogs were deployed, but the terrain worked against the search. The resort's remote location made it difficult to access, and the dense foliage concealed more than it revealed. Then came the first grim discovery. 2 sandals, one belonging to Emily, the other to Brad, were found about 300 feet from a sharp cliff edge. Nearby, a broken pair of sunglasses and a crumpled resort brochure lay in the dirt. Searchers feared the worst, that one or both of them had fallen. But the ground near the edge showed scuff marks that hinted at a struggle, not an accident. Investigators began to question if this was more than a disappearance. On June 19, 2 full days after they were last seen, the body of Brad Weston was found at the base of the cliff. He was face down, partially submerged in a rocky tide pool. Rescue workers initially assumed he had fallen, but the autopsy told a different story. Brad had suffered multiple blows to the head and neck, inconsistent with a simple drop. His wrist was broken, his fingernails cracked and dirty, as if he'd fought for his life. He had been murdered, his body dumped to make it look like a tragic accident. Emily was still missing, and hope for her safety was fading quickly. Her family flew into Costa Rica, pleading with authorities and the media to keep searching. Her mother's voice trembled during interviews, asking her daughter to please come home. The case now attracted international attention. Tourists at the resort were questioned and soon relocated for their own safety. Crime scene investigators swarmed the area, and detectives began canvassing nearby villages. The once idyllic resort transformed into a crime scene overnight. The image of a smiling, honeymooning couple was replaced with headlines filled with horror and mystery. Somewhere in the jungle, the truth about what happened to Emily was waiting to be uncovered, and whatever that truth was, it wasn't going to be easy to face. As the search for Emily intensified, investigators began to piece together a chilling timeline. Brad had likely been killed sometime on the morning of June 17, based on the condition of his body and environmental factors. But Emily's fate remained uncertain. With no confirmed sightings and no contact, police feared she was either being held or had already met a similar fate. The urgency deepened when a disturbing development emerged. Emily's bank card had been used 18 hours after Brad's estimated time of death. It was a small transaction at a roadside convenience store just outside the town of Nasara, nearly 2 miles from the resort. Security footage from the store proved invaluable. Grainy and low resolution, the video captured a man in a weathered grey hoodie and black cargo pants purchasing snacks, water, and a prepaid cell phone using Emily's card. His face was obscured by the hood, but his posture and movements caught the attention of detectives. What truly gave him away, though, were the tattoos on his hands, faded ink that matched the criminal record of Mateo Rodriguez, a 31-year-old local man known for theft, assault, and drug use. Mateo had a history of lurking near beach towns, preying on vulnerable tourists and vanishing for months into the jungle. Locals described him as unpredictable, cunning, and violent. With the suspect now identified, authorities launched a full-scale manhunt. Roadblocks were set up, boats searched, and drones dispatched across the coastline. Interpol was notified. Investigators believed Mateo had been watching the couple for days, possibly tracking their movements from the moment they arrived at the resort. The isolated cabin, the lack of nearby guests, and the absence of security cameras made it the perfect target. Detectives suspected he waited until the early hours of the morning, broke in silently, and attacked while they were asleep. He likely killed Brad first, dragging his body away from the cabin to dispose of it over the cliff. Emily, however, was nowhere to be found. What he had done with her in the hours following the murder remained a terrifying question. Evidence gathered from the cabin supported this theory. A broken drawer, smeared fingerprints, and bloodstains near the door hinted at a struggle. Emily's journal, partially ripped and stained, was found on the floor. A final entry, half-written, trailing off mid-sentence, was dated the night before they disappeared. Authorities speculated that Mateo kept her alive temporarily, possibly to use her for leverage or force her to reveal pins and passwords. Whatever his reason, the clock was ticking. Every passing hour meant the chances of finding her alive were slipping away. The story now dominated international headlines. What had started as a tragic accident was now being called a calculated abduction and murder. Emily's family held a press conference, begging for her safe return. Social media exploded with theories, sightings, and outrage. But deep inside the Costa Rican jungle, far from the flashing cameras and media frenzy, a dangerous man was on the run, and the search for Emily had become a desperate race against time. On the morning of June 22, a breakthrough came when a local farmer reported a strange odor and disturbed earth near a creek just outside the jungle perimeter. Authorities arrived within the hour, cautiously combing through the dense greenery. An uneven terrain. Hidden beneath a layer of palm fronds and loose soil, they found what they had been dreading, the body of Emily Weston. She was buried in a shallow grave, her arms tucked close to her chest, and her white sundress stained with mud and blood. Her wedding ring was missing, and a long piece of torn fabric had been knotted tightly around her neck. The final hours of her life had been brutal. There were signs she had been bound and held captive, and the medical examiner later determined she had been strangled approximately 24 hours after Brad's death. Around the burial site, investigators found more pieces of the puzzle. A half-burned notebook, likely belonging to Brad, was scattered nearby with pages blackened by fire and water. A small pendant Emily always wore was half-buried near the creek bed. Police also discovered remnants of a makeshift campsite, discarded food wrappers, a water bottle, and a crude hammock made from rope and vines. It became clear that Mateo Rodriguez had stayed close to the resort area longer than anyone had realized. He had hidden in the jungle, likely watching as police swarmed the area. The remoteness of the terrain worked in his favor. He knew the landscape better than anyone and used it to avoid capture. The condition of Emily's grave suggested it had been hastily prepared. Her body was only partially covered, and the nearby foliage had been trampled, indicating he may have left in a hurry. Authorities speculated that after using Emily's bank cards and seeing the growing media attention, Mateo panicked and killed her to eliminate the final witness. He then attempted to flee the region entirely. Investigators expanded the search radius, targeting coastal escape routes and remote villages known for harboring fugitives. Posters with Mateo's face were distributed, and a reward was offered for any information leading to his arrest. Back in Oregon, Emily and Brad's families were notified of the discovery. Their grief was now absolute. The couple who had danced barefoot under string lights just days before their trip had now both been violently taken, far from home. The wedding video that had once been a source of joy became a painful reminder of everything they had lost. The contrast between the promise of their honeymoon and the horror that followed made international headlines, prompting warnings from travel authorities and safety reviews for resorts in remote areas. Tourists who had once flocked to the secluded eco-resort now avoided it completely. The property, once seen as a peaceful escape, was closed indefinitely. Vines and moss crept over the empty cabins, and nature slowly reclaimed the space. In the silence left behind, the memory of Emily and Brad remained, a haunting echo of love stolen too soon. 3 days after Emily's body was found, authorities received a tip from a dock worker in Punta Arenas, a busy coastal town nearly 100 miles from the crime scene. A man matching Mateo Rodriguez's description had tried to buy passage on a small fishing vessel headed north. He was carrying a duffel bag, appeared agitated, and paid in US dollars. The worker remembered the tattoos on his hands and the way he avoided eye contact. Within hours, police locked down the port and scanned surveillance footage, confirming the sighting. An arrest team was dispatched, and on the morning of June 25, Mateo was found hiding in a storage shed near the harbor, curled up behind crates of equipment. When he was captured, he carried Emily's missing wedding ring, Brad's wallet, and a large hunting knife still stained with traces of blood. In the duffel bag were torn clothes, stolen cash, and a cheap prepaid phone. He was taken into custody without resistance, but his eyes remained cold and detached. During questioning, Mateo confessed in pieces. He claimed the attack wasn't planned in full, that he had been watching the couple for days, waiting for an opportunity to rob them. He said Brad surprised him during the break-in, and that things got out of control. He admitted to killing Emily but downplayed the brutality, insisting it was quick. Forensic evidence and autopsy results painted a very different picture. His confession closed the case, but it brought little comfort to the families. Emily's parents spoke to the press, stating that no punishment would ever undo the horror of what had happened. Brad's younger brother, a firefighter, said he couldn't stop imagining the fear his brother must have felt in those final moments. The grief was heavy and inescapable. A memorial was held in Oregon where hundreds gathered to honor the lives of the young couple. Photos from their wedding were displayed beside childhood pictures and travel memories. Friends and family spoke of their generosity, their joy, and the dreams they had for the future. The pain in the room was suffocating. In Costa Rica, the impact of the murders was long-lasting. The resort never reopened. The owner, once proud of the peaceful retreat he had built, couldn't bear the association with the tragedy. The jungle reclaimed the site quickly. Trees grew through the floorboards. The cabin where Emily and Brad stayed became a hollow, decaying shell. Locals called it La Casa del Silencio, the House of Silence. Some said it was cursed. Others simply avoided it out of respect or fear. Tour guides stopped leading hikes nearby. The cliff where Brad's body was found became overgrown and inaccessible. Though justice had been served, the story lingered. Documentaries, podcasts, and true crime forums continued to revisit the case, searching for meaning in something so senseless. But the truth was simple and brutal. A young couple, full of hope, had their lives stolen in the very place they believed would bring them peace. Their story became a chilling reminder that even in paradise, darkness can strike, and once it does, nothing is ever truly the same again.